I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two. Hey, everybody, I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two, the podcast for the brave. Today is truly one of the most exciting days that I've had in a really long time because I have the honor of sitting down with Jem Palmer of the Center for Nonreligious Spirituality. And Jem today is going to answer two questions that I get on my platforms all the time. One of the biggest ones that I get is, how did I transition from Mormonism and the alt-right and my MAGA community, Christian nationalism, white supremacist mentality into being, you guys are really kind to me. My audience thinks that I'm a fairly well-rounded, nice person trying to make a difference in the world today. So I get a lot of questions about, how did you get to where you are today and having peace and happiness and in general trying not to hate other people? And one of the answers to that is genuinely the thoughts and the work of Jem Palmer. And I could not say that, and I would not say that about almost anybody else in the world. But at a time that I was going through religious deconstruction, I found the writings, the books, and the thoughts of Jem, and it has been instrumental in me finding an authentic space to heal and become a better person. So just by having you on the show, Jem, that answers for a lot of people the question of, why is Jenny who she is today? Well, Jem, and I don't say that facetiously, you have been a big part of me finding a different direction. You created a space for me to explore something outside of Christianity and outside of religion that nobody else was offering. And the second question that I get a lot we'll address in a little bit. But first, I'd like you to introduce yourself. Jem, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about being here. I appreciate the introduction. I'll give you that $100 a little later in exchange for all these nice words. But my transition out of Christianity was volatile, it was painful, and it was public. And just kind of a quick Cliff Notes version of my life story. So I grew up in a very abusive, volatile, violent family environment. So my childhood and youth was very traumatic. My mother was schizophrenic. She was an alcoholic. My father left when I was young. My older brother was a very violent individual. And so I managed to make it through my childhood and my youth. And as a senior to high school, I became convinced that hooking my wagon up to Jesus by becoming a born-again Christian was the way to resolve the emotional pain and the hardship and my lack of purpose and direction in life. So sitting in a McDonald's in Blacksburg, Virginia, I prayed the sinner's prayer over an Egg McMuffin and became a born-again Christian, went off to college. And with my undergraduate in college, I got involved. My first day at the student center, I ran into a guy who was the student director of something called the Campus Crusade for Christ, which is a Christian college ministry. And I got involved in that. One day he asked me to share my testimony in front of the group of people on how I became to know or become a Christian. And unbeknownst to me, something came over me. I delivered this impassioned speech that left everybody in shock. And this
Did you know you had that in you? Or was that the first moment that you realized that you had it?
It was the first moment that I realized. So, but it was enough to get me to thinking that maybe my direction in life had something to do with Christian leadership and pastoral ministry. So I graduated from college. I got my undergrad degrees in journalism. I went to a state university here in Tennessee. Well, not here. I'm in Costa Rica right now, but in Tennessee, where I've spent the bulk of my life, and decided to go up to Chicago and go to theological school. So I got a master's of divinity from Trinity Seminary in Chicago. And while I was up there, one of my professors strongly encouraged me to pursue a ministry opportunity at a nearby church. Well, it turns out the nearby church was the largest Christian church at the time in North America. Now, this was back 25, 30 years ago. And
wow.
So I was recruited to become a pastor of that church, which I did. So I pastored at that church and then eventually decided to plant another mega church, non-denominational style ministry in the South. And it was bumping along, it was going, it was growing. For that period of time in my life, I was sort of the mega church super pastor guy, leading conferences on how to grow churches and things like this, until one day I noticed that despite all my seminary developed good theological education and all my teaching about God, despite that, I started noticing that a lot of the same problems among people in our church persisted: anxiety, depression, broken relationships, unhappiness, and so on. And in a very rare moment of self-honesty, I looked in the mirror and realized that I myself did not seem to have the peace and the liberation and the well-being. When Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free," well, I definitely wasn't free, and I was also caught in a lot of brokenness and unhappiness and anxiety and so on. So I knew that there was a problem. Something was wrong. I had all what I believed to be the correct answers about God from the Bible, and yet people's lives and my life were broken. And so I decided at that point that I was going to resign my position. I was going to walk away from the Christian faith in my ministerial career and try to figure out what was the problem? Where did I go wrong? What happened? And this was back before religious deconstruction was even a term, or religious trauma was really on anybody's radar. So I just kind of stumbled through trying to figure out what it looked like to cultivate a healthy, liberating spirituality untethered from from organized religion and from my religious theology. So I started deconstructing and published a couple books. People would email me, "Jim, I can understand. I feel where you're at. I get it. I need some help in my leaving religion process. I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do," and so on. And that's what started me doing individual calls with people to discuss religious deconstruction. So I think I estimated that over the 25 years, I've probably spent 40,000 hours working with people in individual and group work around existential health and religious deconstruction and post-religion reconstruction and secular spirituality. And ultimately, all that led to founding the Center for Nonreligious Spirituality, which fundamentally is offering a safe space of acceptance and love and belonging, where people who leave religion can connect with other people who understand where they're at, will accept them where they're at, will let them ask the questions that they have and be themselves and explore, not fear, judgment, or condemnation. Now, to maybe answer something you said, and you're at to stop me because you know that I could talk the whole hour and never take a breath, but
Please do.
no, as part of my journey, eventually I discovered that, so I did befriend someone early in my spiritual deconstruction who was a Buddhist scholar. He just happened to live in our neighborhood. We became friends. We would go on walks together. And although I don't identify as a Buddhist, nor do I as a Christian, or nor do I really as anything, the one thing I did learn from my friend is something called universal and indiscriminate compassion, which I came to believe is really the chief characteristic of a mature spirituality is holding everyone in compassion and learning and growing into the ability to be able to do that. Because you leave religion and you rightfully feel anger because you've been betrayed.
I was robbed 44 years.
Your life, robbed, betrayed.
2,000 Sundays. I married that man in the temple and had the babies. $300,000 in tithing to the Mormon church. I don't have retirement. I have a few $100s in my savings account. I was robbed. I was angry. I was bitter. Yeah.
Yeah. So it
feel all that.
And I think that part of the deconstruction process is creating space where people can feel and process all the difficult emotions that come with parting with your religious background: anger, betrayal, disillusionment, loneliness. You lose so much when you leave, right? Like for some people, they lost their existential security that was wrapped up in all the beliefs they learned. They
I'm not going to see my
probably,
grandma again. My grandma died. We were supposed to live in the celestial kingdom together forever. And that loss of faith was, I had to grieve the death of my grandma from 20 years ago all over again, because what if I'm not going to see her again? I lost my
right.
family too. I have not seen my mom since I was a Mormon 7 years ago. I lost everyone. I lost everything.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things is that not only your belief structure, but your entire relational world is often collapses. And the people that once were your lifelong friends now become the people who judge and shun and cut you out of their lives, including, like you said, your closest family members. And
Nobody
so
likes
it's a
a
lot of
black sheep.
loss. Right. It's a loss. Sometimes it's a loss of identity. It's a loss of your social network. It's a loss of your, or a collapse or disruption or rupture of your relational world. And then, of course, your belief system collapse. All those things that you were told that you had faith in terms of your beliefs about God, life, yourself, the afterlife, spirituality, and so on. I mean, it's catastrophic for many people when they leave religion to suffer all that loss. And so I think that one thing that I've realized is that there's that phrase that says time has a way of healing wounds, but I have found
No.
no, right. No, like time alone can only potentially make you more bitter and angrier. And I guess what I've
That's where
seen
I
is,
found myself. Time wasn't healing my wounds.
yeah,
I tried to end my life because of my existential crisis. That's why I'm called Life Take Two. People think I have, oh, what a cute handle you have, Jenny. That handle I got after I woke up from the coma from a medical practitioner who was there in the hospital with me, who said, Jenny, it's like your life take two. For some of us, losing our faith in our community and the existential void that we find ourselves in leads to so much pain that it's like, how do I even wake up tomorrow and put one foot in front of the other? I lost the husband, I lost the dog, I lost everything all at the same time. And I didn't have a clear direction on how to move past that and move forward with that. So time wasn't healing anything. Time was making me sink further into the void, unfortunately. So thank you for having a life raft out there that myself and other people have been able to grasp onto, because you helped me correct the spiritual ocean that I was drowning in.
yeah, I think a phrase I often use is you deconstruct to reconstruct. And the idea is that so what happens a lot of times with deconstruction is, okay, a lot of people will rather quickly, once you pull the thread of doubt and you come out from behind your sort of like religious stupor and you start kind of seeing the problems and the absurdities and the insanities, like you can pretty quickly start deconstructing through a lot of course, organized church
Government.
or religious structures, but theology. Like I deconstructed
Yeah.
major pieces of my theology. I mean, I deconstructed away the idea of original sin and the fall of humankind. I deconstructed the whole idea, the conception of God in the Bible of Christian theism. I deconstructed the whole idea of original sin, eternal hell. I fairly quickly moved through those. And sometimes what happens is you just keep deconstructing down to the studs of human existence. And then what I mean by that is like you question and doubt and deconstruct everything.
Jim, one morning I woke up and I found myself having deconstructed religion and then, America and Earth and the solar system. And I was just laying in bed going, like, I'm just a blob of molecules. I'm not Jenny. I'm not even a mom. I'm not a woman. I'm molecules laying in a mattress made out of molecules. How can I go on? The deconstruct. If you're a
And
really good deconstructor, you just deconstruct. And yeah, then like the mattress doesn't exist. I don't exist. Now what?
right, and that it kind of bottoms out or can in nihilism, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
people feel that malaise, that lack of purpose and meaning, that questioning of everything, that the absence of any absolutes to hang your life on, and that often becomes nihilism. That's why you got to deconstruct or reconstruct, because like historically, this is it's a common occurrence that when there is an exodus from religion, that leaves a void. And in the absence of any reconstruction in that void, then it can become very nihilistic. So if you go all the way back, like to Friedrich Nietzsche and his whole "God is dead" statement, once there was a scientific explanation for the universe through Darwin, which no longer necessitated a belief in God. And then Nietzsche says, okay, well, therefore we can declare that God is dead. But the death of everything that God represents, because of course God is the master signifier, everything of significance for many people is attached to this word and concept of God. And so it can lead to that place of nihilism. So I've talked about in recent years the need to cultivate something called existential health, which is your relationship to, or a constructive relationship with, the givens of human existence. Now, religion sets us up for a problem because it skirts around or does spiritual bypass and just flat out denies these givens, like human mortality. There's a 100% mortality rate, right? We all die. Another one is human insatiability. Like, we're never going to be 100% happy. There's always going to be some sense of lack that's a part of the human experience. And you have to cultivate a relationship with that fact, or you're just going to chase everything under the sun with the false idea that I can be perfectly happy. And or the meaninglessness of life is another given of human existence. And what I mean by that is that there's not an absolute one size fits all ultimate grand purpose that we all orient our lives around. However, the good news is that we have the freedom to create meaning ourselves. We are the meaning maker. So rather than meaning being a thing you find, like some answer in a lockbox at the center of the universe, instead, it's you are the meaning maker. Part of the human person's journey is creating meaning for themselves. So, I think that nihilism gets a bad rap from the sense that it can be constructive, and sometimes it's often necessary to, kind of get to ground zero and feel some of that difficulty as part of and to grieve the loss there, to grieve the rupture, as a part of the process that ultimately leads to reconstruction. And I think the way
Jim, that's
Jesus,
really important. That's crucial. I wouldn't be happy today if I hadn't hit that rock bottom. And my plunge to ground zero was like cataclysmic and so fast. I left religion in one day. I didn't have a shelf. I didn't deconstruct gradually. I went to church one day believing, in the middle of church, realized, oh my God, I don't want to be here. 2 weeks later, resigned from the church at age 44. So I hit that ground zero very rapidly. And it was so painful that I almost didn't survive it. But it was just being in that time. Not that I was embracing it or doing anything. I was just stuck there. It was being stuck in that dark nihilistic void that now, that's always kind of in my rear view mirror, that look at me now, I feel so much happier than the nihilistic void. So that's really important. I've never heard you talk about that before, but that's crucial to get to that spot or something like that.
And of course it's different for everyone, right? There's the So there's the concept of intersectionality, which, that suffering is unique to every person based on a lot of different factors. So in religious deconstruction or leaving religion, obviously there's a way that women are traumatized that men aren't. For example, the effects of religious patriarchy. Now, I don't mean to say, because I think patriarchy damages men and women. However, I think there's a way it traumatizes women in a way that's unique to women and is a part of their deconstruction process that others won't necessarily have to work through. Or take the LGBTQI plus community. There's a way that religion traumatizes that group of people in ways that will make their pain different and their reconstruction different. I saw a recent study says that 1 in 3 Americans say that they have had at some point in their lives an experience where they were traumatized by religion, and exponentially those that are in the LGBTQI plus community have experienced that. Gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, race, and even your religious background, right? Like an ex-Mormon experiences things that like an ex-Catholic wouldn't, or
Mhm.
I mean, there's definitely, or an ex-evangelical. I mean, there's definitely some similarities, but so I think that one of the problems is religion is so built on binary thinking. But when you leave religion, that there are many more options.
Mhm.
You can believe in ultimate reality and even God, but not subscribe to the Christian idea of God. You can find meaning and significance in the person Jesus, but not be a Christian. And by the way, I think that Jesus would refute most of what is considered to be Christianity. I think that Christianity, modern Christianity, is mostly a Pauline creation. And I think that Jesus wouldn't subscribe to most of it. You can find meaning in the Bible, but not necessarily view it as the absolute, truth that came directly from God Almighty. You can embrace meaningful relationships and not go to church. You can be spiritual, but not religious. I mean, like there's a lot of choices that
And build
people
rituals around things that aren't godly or religious. I think, Britt Hartley, who you trained, and I have her books, and she's just been so helpful to me too. That's one of the big things that she promotes is creating new rituals that are non-religious. All these things are possible outside of religion without
you
having a
can
religion. And that's what your Center for Non-Spiritual or Non-Religious Spirituality is all about.
Yeah, I think that you can think of part of your religious past as compost that can be rewilded in ways that are meaningful to the person who leaves religion. Now, people who leave religion, they go a lot of different paths, right? Sometimes people will leave religion and they will kind of arrive at a more sort of progressive, maybe even Christian-ish spirituality. And that's fine. Some people leave religion and they find Eastern spirituality like Buddhism, a path that works for them. That's fine. Some people leave religion and they cultivate a soulful atheism, and that's fine. So there's a lot of different directions that people can go in their post-religious reconstruction. But I found that the real core to me in deconstruction or reconstruction work is cultivating a new kind of relationship with yourself. At least for me, back in my religious days, the question is, well, how's your relationship with God? Tell me about your relationship with God. How's that going? When I think the question is, how's your relationship with you?
Nobody
How's your
ever
relationship?
asked me that. They didn't care. They
I
didn't they
know.
didn't want me to exist. Me was insignificant. I was nothing. I was a pawn in the game of the Mormon gospel. I was a drop in the ocean, really. So I was supposed to be a
Yeah.
living sacrifice. I was supposed to give up who I was and in all humility take on the countenance of Jesus. So I didn't exist. I was just a reflection of Christ.
Yeah, that's toxic religion is based on a sort of spiritual codependency where you lose yourself in order to make God happy. However, that's defined by the church, right? All those things, all the list of do's and don'ts, and all this whole misreading of this idea of you must deny yourself and pick up your cross and so on. It all becomes this really toxic codependency to God. But to create a different kind of relationship with yourself, self-trust, self-compassion, self-respect, self-determination, that mending a healthier relationship with yourself. Because if you don't do that, here's what happens, is that you can easily switch your dependency from the old gurus to the new ones, right? Like it used to be the Mormon bishops and we all like bow down to them and listen. Okay. So now it's the atheist bishops, right? It's Sam Harris or whoever, like Richard Dawkins or whoever, the Dan McClellan or whoever.
Well, I went from church to church. So I left the Mormon church. A week later, I was in a Christian church. My friend Daniela is a knitting cult lady, and she's a cult expert. And she says, you always replace one cult with another cult. And that's exactly what I did. And my Christian church wasn't a cult. It was just this like come to church on Sunday type of thing. But I was like going to 3 different Bible studies, and I turned that Christian church into what my Mormon church had been. So I did. I jumped right from one to another. And it did prevent me from having to look into myself. I didn't have to look in a mirror at all. I built another framework around me where I didn't exist anymore so that I could just keep on keeping on. It wasn't until 2 years ago that I left all religion. And really, like you're saying, that's when I had to look and say, like, who is me? What's underneath this? And that what do you call it? Existential health every day. So I've listened to your podcast on that. It's a big, you guys, that's why I am who I am today. It's Jem Palmer's existential health. I think of it as existential hygiene. So when I'm checking in and making sure that I'm boundaried and that I'm showing up for myself and caring for myself and that I'm giving back in ways that I feel are authentic and congruous with who I am, all of those little things, even if I hike the mountain today and stand there for 5 minutes and meditate and just soak up the beauty of nature, the saguaros and the prickly pear around me, that is my existential hygiene. Just like my dental hygiene, I floss and brush. I now practice existential hygiene, but I never felt like I had to. I was just supposed to listen to the Holy Ghost and give myself to Jesus, and then Jesus would give me back a personality and a heart. But that absolutely didn't work. So, we jump from one cult to another. Like,
yeah. Well, I think it's a common mistake, maybe, is to think of deconstruction essentially as a belief system swap, out with the old, in with the new. Here's my old beliefs, here's my new ones. And the thing sometimes about religion and sometimes philosophy, if that's your only spiritual nutrition, is that it can build things around questions of matters that can be far removed from your embodied, lived human experience. Sort of these abstract questions about, is there a God? What is God? What happens when you die? What's the meaning of the universe? So on and so forth. And versus questions that are closer to your lived human experience, questions like, what brings me joy? What makes me come alive? What centers me? You know, like those kinds of questions are the important questions to be answered for a person's spiritual reconstruction, not trying to find grand answers to these huge questions that we can only speculate on, really. Like, I don't know what happens when we die. I'm not going to really know until I die. And even if you believe every near-death experience account, like, you still don't know what's going to happen when you die for sure.
I had a near-death experience due to surgery following an ovarian tumor. My heart stopped. I had an out-of-body experience with a secondary awareness, and I am an atheist. So who
Yeah, and
knows what
I
that
think,
was? Who knows what it means? We won't
yeah,
know until our heart stops for good.
yeah, and I don't know if you've heard this phrase. You probably have, I'm sure. The God of the gaps, and the idea with God of the
Mhm.
gaps is anything that happens that can't be explained sufficiently by science, the answer is God, right? And there's a lot of stuff in that category, right? Like Sam Harris, I mentioned him, he's done a very good job. Well, in general, atheism has had some problems along the way. There is some baggage associated with atheism, which in my view, it's mainly because of this new atheism some time ago when the four horsemen like Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and Chris Hitchens and Sam Harris were sort of the face of atheism. And at the time, they were
The
very,
atheist patriarchy. They didn't have enough women, Jim. That's the problem.
right, it's true. It was very patriarchal. And in addition to that, at the time, it really found no space for anything good about religion and low key almost spirituality. So to Richard Dawkins, like anything religious was a sign of mental illness. So, but since then, and by the way, some of the leading atheists right now are not men, they're women, and they're not Americans. They're from different places around the world, and yourself and Britt included. But but I think that Sam Harris, for example, and Dawkins have softened their stance on religion, but Sam Harris particularly has really pioneered in modern times a way of appreciating even the mystery of what we would use the word spirituality to refer to, but not ascribe it to something supernatural or something beyond his atheism for
But he could be wrong. I think that's the interesting thing. We could all be wrong. Who knows? We don't know.
yes. And so
Jim?
that's a great point, which is like, what is the point here anyway? Is it to be right, or is it to be liberated? Is it to be transformed into different kinds of people? Is it to become more profound human beings? Is it to find an integral way of life that reflects the values and the meaning that we have established for ourselves?
Mm-hmm. You don't have a ton of time, and I want to answer the second question. First of all, thank you for all of your thoughts. I know that there will be so many people in my audience that will be so helped by this discussion up to this point. One of the biggest questions that I get right now is in regards to Christianity and why the Christian church has gone so bonkers in America. And it seems like it's on the wrong side of everything. And I remember some time ago reading, I don't know if it was one of your books. And by the way, I will put the links to some of Jem's books in the description. The one that was pivotal for me was Inner Anarchy. And even just the title, because I felt like I was in such a state of inner anarchy that like it grabbed me immediately. I also have not finished, but the half that I've read of Being Jesus in Nashville, incredible book. Absolutely love it. So highly recommend those books to all of my audience. But I remember reading a while ago, is it 10 things that the church gets wrong? I say on my channel a lot that if Christian Jesus was alive today, he'd be pissed to see what's going on in some of the churches, including the one that I walked out of 2 years ago, not the Mormon church, but the Christian church that I transitioned to after breaking from Mormonism. So do you have that list? Can
I
you
do have
tell
that,
us?
Grizzly.
Can you tell us some of those
Yeah.
points? Okay.
Well, let me just first say that Christianity does not own Jesus. I mean, I think to state the obvious, Jesus is not a Christian. Jesus did not start Christianity. If Jesus were here today, he would not be a Christian, and he would refute virtually the bulk of what gets passed off as Christian theology. Now, I'm sure everyone's heard by now Project 2025. Well, before Project 2025, there was Project 325, which is also called Constantine's Shift, which was the Emperor Constantine conveniently getting born again and using Christianity as a way of stabilizing his political empire. People in political power have always found ways to leverage religious sentiments to achieve their goals. And the rise of this interest in Christian nationalism is certainly something that Jesus would not endorse. And in my view, it's another example of what happened with Constantine, which is people that are hijacking Christianity as a religion in order to achieve all kinds of different political and goals of power. But here's the list. Here's a few things on
Okay.
the list. 10 things that 10 things about Christianity that Jesus would refute. Number one, that his vision for a transformed society got twisted into an afterlife fantasy about heaven. Another one is that a religion was formed to worship his name instead of a movement to advance his message. And, the idea there is that Jesus never intended to start a religion. Jesus never wanted people to worship him. In fact, Jesus said, I'm going to have to go away. And his reasoning is look, guys, if I don't go away, this is going to end up being a Jesus the person cult. And he was trying to teach the whole time, the kingdom of God is within you. That spirit that's in me is in you. It's not a Jesus thing. It's a you thing. Another one, that the gospel says his death solved the problem of humankind's separation from God, instead of accepting his truth that there is no separation. One of the biggest lies of Christian teaching is what I call separation theology. This idea that there's a God up in the sky and you're separated and estranged from that God. And Jesus never taught that. I can argue that Jesus was an atheist, meaning that Jesus did not subscribe to the God of religion. In fact, there's a place in the Bible where he says, your God is the father of lies, your God is evil. When Jesus referred to the religious God, he was very strong to renounce that God. When Jesus says he's divine and human, or the idea that Jesus is divine and human, is that he's the son of man. In other words, he's a representative of all of humankind, and wants us to understand in that statement that we all are divine and human. We are all connected to ultimate reality. We are not separated from it. Now, the fact that Jesus used Father as a metaphor to describe God is another conversation that we could have, which we don't have time to have. But I think that Jesus did not come to cure separation from God. Jesus came to let us know that there is no separation.
And also, separation from one another is a big part of what's going on in Christianity right now. We're the chosen. We are God's, we're children of God. I actually listened to a sermon from a Christian church that I used to attend here recently, where they defined child of God. And it was anyone who believes in and has said that prayer and accepted Jesus and walks in his way. And then everybody else, they're not. They're the goats, they're the black sheep, they're the rejected. And God will say, I do not know you. So a lot of that separation, it's separation from God, separation from others. Everybody's separating everybody. And there's so little unity within what is passed as Christianity right now. So kind of scary.
Yes, I think that part of the problem is that part of the problem is how we think of the Bible. How should we take the Bible? How should we interpret the Bible? And so there's a lot of really bad theology that divides people because, in my view, is a misunderstanding of what the Bible is and what it means and how it should be taken. But here's another one. That people are waiting on Jesus to return to save the world and end suffering, rather than taking responsibility for saving the world and solving suffering ourselves. I mean, I hate to, and again, this is my view. I'm not trying to push his view on anybody else. anything and everything that Jesus was going to do, Jesus did. He ain't coming back. He's not going to ride in on a white horse and save everything for everybody, because for a lot of different reasons. One is that Jesus, the person, the Jesus of Nazareth, the historical Jesus, is not alive, in my view. And then on top of that, Jesus' message is that we are the ones that bring liberation to the world. Look, people walk around thinking, I don't know why God allows so much suffering in the world. When the question is, why do we allow so much suffering in the world? God has nothing to do with it. God is not causing suffering. And this idea that there's an external force that's going to work all this out in the end is highly problematic. I mean, I travel the world doing human rights work, which means that I posed as a customer in brothels that traffic 10, 11, 12-year-old girls, force them to have sex with customers 4 to 5 times a day, 6 days a week. I posed as an investor in child slave labor camps where little boys are chained to poles and are expected to roll cigarettes and meet a quota. And if they don't, they're beaten with electrical cords. Now, my theology about God's justice and God's power and God's goodness pretty much disintegrated in Southeast Asia, sitting in brothels in child slave labor camps. But here's the good news. The good news is that rescuing little girls from forced child prostitution or rescuing little boys from forced child labor is not that difficult to do. Like, there are people, professionals who do paratroop deployment, criminal investigators that get intel on these operations, show up unannounced, kick in the door of a brothel, arrest the brothel owners, rescue the little girls out the back door into a van and get them involved in the necessary aftercare to help heal their physical and psychological wounds. So
humans do have some remarkable power. We don't have to sit around and say a prayer.
Yeah. So, and I know another one is that people have come to associate Jesus with church, theology, politics, and power rather than courage, justice, humanity, beauty, and love. I mean, and that's just a beginning point in terms of looking at ways that Christianity as a religion has gone so far off the rails in terms of representing what Jesus was about. Jesus spoke truth to power. Jesus did not endorse empire. Jesus believed that the work should be placed in the hands of the common people to be instruments of courage and justice and humanity and beauty and love. So I think that a lot of politics, it's easy to get really pissed at what you're against, right? Like, it's just, we're against this, we're against that, we're against, but what would it look like for your life to be a courageous expression of what you are for? What are you for? And I don't mean just how is your life a manifesto for what you are for, what you want to see happen? That courage, that justice, that humanity, that beauty, and love. Let's just take love. I have people say to me all the time, Jim, I can't figure out the meaning of life, the purpose of life. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't even know what's ethical anymore because all that kind of went away when I left religion. How about this? The Bible says God is love. Is love. Which you could turn around and say love is God. I mean, the performance-based mindset that religion teaches about God is so messed up because it's transactional, right? You fulfill your duties in order to get a divine reward. But the Bible says that God is love. Like the fundamental character of ultimate reality or God, if you want to use that word, is love, which means that love is God. So, in other words, like love, in every expression of it, giving it and receiving it, is, you could argue, the highest truth and the ultimate reality. So here's a question that you could ask yourself, and it's the only question you have to ask for the rest of your life every day. You could all just ask this question, and you're good to go for the rest of your life. Don't worry about, is there a God? What happens when I die? What's the meaning of life? What purpose should I be following? Just this question. Ask this question. What does it mean right now for me to be love? Yeah. Now, look, I know I'm not saying that's an easy question to answer. It's not, right? What it means to be love when you're having coffee with your best friend versus what it means to be love with the person who is abusive to you, what it means to be love with the person that agrees with all your beliefs, and what does it mean to be love with the person that doesn't. I'm not saying it's easy to figure out. I'm not saying it's an easy question to answer. I'm just saying it's the right question to ask. Now, I'm also acknowledging that the word love is a little tricky, because if you came out of religion, you learned some really interesting things about love, which is that, well, God loves everybody, but unfortunately, he's going to have to send 2/3 of
Most people to hell.
Right. So,
Bless
I
their
know
hearts.
that there's, if you look at the late James Dobson and the Focus on the Family movement, right, we also got all that kind of like parenting, which is, well, I hate to do this. I love you, so I'm going to beat the hell out of you.
Yep.
So, I mean, I get that the word love could even be a trigger word, but I guess my point is, you could say, be courage, be justice, be humanity, be beauty. The question is your way of being in the world, and what it would look like to live that way in your everyday, the paths of your ordinary lived human experience.
That's it. Jim, I know that you have to go, and I feel like you've given us so much to listen to, that I think that this is a beautiful place to have your final thoughts and segue and say goodbye, so that we can kind of digest everything that you've shared. That right there has changed my life. I get so many questions now, like, what's your religion? So you're an atheist. Well, my religion is life. My prayer is service and love to other people. And where am I going to go when I die? It doesn't matter. I will know that I've lived beautifully. And I wasn't living beautifully inside of my religion, because I was so worried about what was going to happen after I died and building that kingdom, that the person that I was here didn't matter to me at all. And just nurturing my soul and the souls of the people around me, my kids, my partner, and everybody, it's been a beautiful thing. So thank you so much. I would encourage my audience, go back and give this a second listen, share with a friend. And to find Jim, I'll put all of his links in the description, but you primarily hang out at the Center for Nonreligious Spirituality. And I'll put that website in our descript. I love Jim's Facebook, because it's little nuggets of thoughts and things every single day. It's like how you open up that little calendar every day and have a treat at Christmas time, your advent calendar with the chocolates. That's what I feel like with your Facebook. Like every day I get a little treat from Jim Palmer. So I'm going to turn it over to you for some final thoughts. And then I know you have to run. What would you like to leave us with, Jim? And thank you so, so much for hanging out with me today. It's been a while.
I guess my final thought would just be wanting to express to anybody who is listening that the performance-based system of religion is false, and you are a person who is worthy of love and acceptance and empathy and compassion and positive regard, just as you are. It's not something that you have to earn. We are all walking wounded, not because we're broken, but because we've lived life. Life wounds everybody. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that you have lived and walked the human journey. So we're all on this together. None of us are perfect. We all carry our scars. and we're each worthy of that love. And I guess the last thing would be, religion often tells us to have faith in God, but consider the possibility of having faith in life. Have faith in life. Their life supplies the raw materials for healing and restoration and regeneration. And I honestly believe that you can trust life itself, that the more you understand it, the more that you give yourself to life, that you discover that you can have faith in it. So I guess that's what I would say. I appreciate you having me, and we'll stay connected. I'll be on anytime again that you want to. And I appreciate your work and just all the people that you've been a pathway towards that liberation and a more spirituality of love and compassion and not hate and division, which is what we need in our world. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. You got to skedaddle. Thank you so much for your heart and soul and everything that you do. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Bye.
Goodbye for now.